Domestic life in New England in the 17th century ******. Domestic life in New England in the 17th century. Parson Capon House, Tarpsfield, built in 1683. Domestic life in New England in the 17th century, a discourse delivered in the lecture hall of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, it being one of a series designed to mark the opening of the American wing by George Francis Dow, Tarpsfield, Massachusetts, printed for the author at the Perkins Press, just off the Main Street, 1925. Copyright, 1925, George Francis Dow. 500 copies printed. The preface. The publication of the following paper, in its present form, became possible when the trustees of the Metropolitan Museum of Art found it necessary to abandon their intention to publish a volume containing the lectures given on the occasion of the opening of the American wing. The other lectures delivered in the course were devoted to the architecture and arts of New England during the 17th and 18th centuries, and it therefore seemed fitting that some account of the domestic life of the period should also have a presentation. Within the limitations of time and space, it was only possible to touch lightly upon so far-reaching a subject, and the reader will soon discover that the following pages may be somewhat overloaded with facts gleaned from original records. It also should be borne in mind that the public records that have come down to us preserve a chronicle of the offences of the day and generation, while the uneventful lives of the honest and the just frequently rest in oblivion. The evil that men do lives after them, the good is oft interred with their bones. Nevertheless, there were fully as many sinners as saints living within the control of the Puritan autocracy in the Massachusetts Bay, and it is to be hoped that the contemporaneous data here presented may aid in bringing about a readjustment of values in the mind of some reader. Illustrations. Parson Capon House, Tarpsfield. Frontispiece. Front door of Capon House 2. Front entry and stairs of Capon House 4. Overhang of the Capon House 6. Parlour of the Capon House 8. John Ward House, Salem 12. Parlour of Ward House 16. Kitchen of Ward House 20. Dresser in Kitchen of Ward House 24. Well curb and sweep, Ward House 28. Domestic life in New England in the 17th century. To picture the life in the homes of the colonists in the years immediately following the settlement would require many screens. Then as now, life had its contrasts, and utmost poverty existed, but shortly removed from comparative wealth. In 1657 an apprentice to a stonemason in the town of Newbury, Massachusetts, testified that it was a long while before he could eat his master's food, viz. meat and milk, or drink beer, saying that he did not know that it was good, because he was not used to eat such victuals, but to eat bread and water porridge, and to drink water. A few miles away, in the town of Ipswich, lived Madame Rebecca Simmons, writing in her 60th year to her son in London to send her a fashionable lawn whisk for her neckwear. In due time he replied that the fashionable lawn whisk is not now worn, either by genteel or simple, young or old. Instead whereof I have bought a shape and ruffles, which is now the wear of the gravest as well as the young ones. Such as go not with naked necks, wear a black wifle over it. Therefore, I have not only bought a plain one white you sent for, but also a lustre one, such as are most in fashion. The dutiful son also purchased for his mother's wear a feather fan, but he writes, to her I should also have found in my heart, to have let it alone, because none but very grave persons, and of them very few, use it. Now 'tis grown almost as obsolete as russets, and more rare to be seen than a yellow hood. When the feather fan reached Ipswich it was found to have a silver handle, and with it came 2 tortoise fans, 200 needles, 5 yards, sky calico, silver gimp, a black sarandin cloak, damson leather skin, 2 women's ivory knives, etc. 2 fine clothing surrounded itself with fine furnishings, according to the standards of the period, and as the wealth of the colonies increased with the successful exportation of fish, lumber, beaver, and peltry, it supplied them with all kinds of luxuries and refinements to be found in the shops of London, Plymouth, or Bristol. The ships were crossing frequently and the colonies kept pace with the mother country much as the country follows the city at the present time. All the while, however, primitive living and also poverty existed everywhere. The inventories of numerous estates show meager household furnishings, and many families of 8 or more persons lived in houses only 18 by 24 feet in size, possibly with a shed attached. Alexander Knight, a pauper in a Massachusetts town, was provided in 1659 with a one-story house 16 feet long and 12 feet wide, having a thatched roof, and costing only £6 to build, which no doubt was typical of the simple dwellings occupied by the poorer colonists in the early days following the settlement. When Governor Winthrop arrived at Charlestown in 1630 with the first great emigration, he found a house or two and several wigwams, rude shelters patterned after the huts built by the Indians, and until houses could be erected in Boston many lived in tents and wigwams, their meeting place being abroad under a tree. Deacon Bartholomew Green, the printer of the Boston Newsletter, related that when his father arrived at Boston in 1630, for lack of housing he was fain to find shelter at night in an empty cask, and during the following winter many of the poorer sort still continued to live in tents through lack of better housing. Parson Capon House, Tarpsfield front door. There is a widespread misconception that the colonists on reaching New England proceeded immediately to build log houses in which to live. Historians have described these log houses as chinked with moss and clay and as having earth floors, precisely the type of house built on the frontier and in the logging camps at a much later period. A well-known picture of Leyden Street, at Plymouth, shows a double row of log houses reaching up the hillside, which the Pilgrims are supposed to have constructed. In point of fact, no contemporary evidence has been found that supports the present-day theory. The early accounts of what took place in the days following the settlements along the coast are full of interesting details relating to day-by-day happenings, but nowhere do we find allusion to a log house, such as modern historians assume existed at that time. 3. What happened at the Plymouth colony after the Mayflower came to anchor? The wind blew very hard for 2 days, and the next day, Saturday, December 23, 1620, as many as could went ashore, felled and carried timber, to provide themselves stuff for building, and the following Monday we went on shore, some to fell timber, some to saw, some to rive, and some to carry. So no men rested all that day. 4. Bradford writes that they built a forte with good timber, which Isaac de Rayes described in 1627 as a large square house, made of thick sawn planks, stayed with oak beams. The oldest existing houses in the Plymouth colony are built in the same manner, and some half-dozen or more 17th-century plank houses may yet be seen north of Boston. Moreover, when the ship Fortune sailed from Plymouth in the summer of 1621, part of her lading consisted of clapboards and wainscot, showing clearly that the colonists soon after landing had dug saw pits and produced boards in quantity suitable for the construction of houses and for exportation. In the summer of 1623 Bradford mentions the building of great houses in pleasant situations, and when a fire broke out in November of the following year it began in a shed YT was joined to the end of ye storehouse, which was wattled up with bose. It will be seen that this shed was not crudely built of logs or slabs, but that its walls were wattled and perhaps also daubed with clay, in precisely the same manner with which these colonists were familiar in their former homes across the sea. An original outer wall in the old Fairbanks house at Dedham, Massachusetts, still has its wattle and daub, constructed in 1637. What can be more natural and humanly probable than to find English housewrights, who had learned their trade overseas, building houses and outbuildings on this side of the Atlantic in the same manner they had been taught through a long apprenticeship in their former homes? Can we of today assume that they, upon the spur of the moment, invented a new type of building, a log house, a construction they had never seen in England, a building also unknown to the Indians? The houses of the Indians were very little and homely, being made with small poles pricked into the ground, and so bended and fastened at the tops, and on the side they are matted with boughs and covered with sedge and old mats. 5. These were called wigwams, and as they were easily constructed and the materials were readily at hand, many of the poorer colonists built for themselves imitations of these rude huts of the Indians. Governor Winthrop records in his journal, in September, 1630, that one Fitch of Watertown had his wigwam burnt down with all his goods, and 2 months later John Furman, also of Watertown, lost his wigwam by fire. Parson Capon House, Tarpsfield front entry and stairs. Thomas Dudley, writing to the Countess of Lincoln, in March, 1631, relates, "We have ordered that no man shall build his chimney with wood nor cover his house with thatch," which was readily assented unto. for that divers houses have been burned since our arrival, the fire always beginning in the wooden chimneys, and some English wigwams, which have taken fire in the roofs with thatch or boughs. 6. It was Dudley who was taken to task by the governor in May, 1632, for bestowing so much cost on wainscoting his house and otherwise adorning it, as it was not a good example for others in the beginning of a plantation. Dudley replied that he had done it for warmth, and that it was but clapboards nailed to the walls. A few months later this house caught fire, the hearth of the hall chimney burning all night upon the principal beam. The frequent references to the English wigwam seem to indicate that some such temporary construction was usual among many of the colonists at the outset. Settlers were living at Salem as early as 1626, and Endicott, with a considerable immigration, arrived in 1628. Marblehead, just across the harbour, was settled early, and yet when John Goit came there in 1637, he first built a wigwam, and lived there till he got a house. 7. The rude buildings also put up by the planters at Salem must have been looked upon at the time as temporary structures, for they had all disappeared before 1661. 8. The town clerk of Woburn, Massachusetts, writing in 1652, mentions the rude shelters of the first settlers, which kept off the short showers from their lodgings, but the long rains penetrated through, to their great disturbance in the night season. Yet, in these poor wigwams, they sing psalms, pray and praise their God, till they can provide them homes, which ordinarily was not wont to be with many, till the earth, by the Lord's blessing, brought forth bread to feed them, their wives and little ones. 9. Before you come, wrote Rev. Francis Higginson, the first minister at Salem, be careful to be strongly instructed what things are fittest to bring with you for your more comfortable passage at sea, as also for your husbandry occasions when you come to the land. For when you are once parted with England you shall meet neither markets nor fair rest to buy what you want. Therefore be sure to furnish yourselves with things fitting to be had before you come, as meal for bread, malt for drink, woolen and linen cloth, and leather for shoes, and all manner of carpenter's tools, and a great deal of iron and steel to make nails, and locks for houses, and furniture for ploughs and carts, and glass for windows, and many other things which were better for you to think of there than to want them here. 10. Elsewhere the good pastor set down a catalogue of such needful things as every planter doth, or ought to provide to go to New England, in which he enumerated the necessary victuals per person for the first year, viz., 8 bushels of meal, 2 bushels of pease, 2 bushels of oatmeal, 1 gallon of aquavity, 1 gallon of oil, 2 gallons of vinegar, 1 firkin of butter, also cheese, bacon, sugar, pepper, cloves, mace, cinnamon, nutmegs and fruit. The household implements listed were 1 iron pot, 1 kettle, 1 frying pan, 1 gridiron, 2 skellets, 1 spit, wooden platters, dishes, spoons and trenchers. Clothing, arms, and tools of all kinds of course must be taken, and the natural resources of New England and the fruits of their husbandry and of the sea were expected to supply the rest of those things necessary to life and comfort. Those who settled along the shore line north of Boston found much fat black earth that yielded bountiful crops. The soil to the southward of Boston Bay was lighter and less productive, but the valley of the Connecticut was found to be of unsurpassed richness. Parson Capon House, Tarpsfield Overhang, and one of the drops, Pastor Higginson wrote enthusiastically of the natural abundance of the grass that groweth very wildly with a great stalk, as high as a man's face, and as for Indian corn, the planting of 13 gallons of seed had produced an increase of 52 hogsheads, or 350 bushels, London measure, to be sold or trusted to the Indians in exchange for beaver worth above £300. Who would not share the hardships and dangers of the frontier colony for opportunity of such rich gain? But the housewives in the faraway English homes were more interested in the growth of the vegetable gardens in the virgin soil, and of these he wrote, "Our turnips, parsnips and carrots are here both bigger and sweeter than is ordinary to be found in England. Here are stores of pump irons, cucumbers, and other things of that nature I know not. Plenty of strawberries in their time, and pennyroyal, winter savory, carvale and watercresses, also leeks and onions are ordinary. Great lobsters abounded weighing from 16 to 25 pounds and much store of bass, herring, sturgeon, haddock, eels, and oysters. In the forests were several kinds of deer, also partridges, turkeys, and great flocks of pigeons, with wild geese, ducks, and other sea-fowl in such abundance, that a great part of the planters have eaten nothing but roast meat of divers fowls which they have killed. These were some of the attractive natural features of the new colony in the Massachusetts Bay, as recounted by the Salem minister. Of the hardships he makes small mention, for his aim was to induce emigration. There was much sickness, however, and many deaths. Higginson himself lived only a year after reaching Salem. The breaking up of virgin soil always brings on malaria and fever. Dudley wrote that there is not an house where there is not one dead, and in some houses many. The natural causes seem to be in the want of warm lodgings, and good diet to which Englishmen are habituated, at home, and in the sudden increase of heat, which they endure that are landed here in summer ******, those of Plymouth, who landed in winter died of the scurvy. As did our poorer sort whose houses and bedding kept them not sufficiently warm, nor their diet sufficiently in heart. 11. Thomas Dudley wrote this in March, 1631. He explained that he was writing upon his knee by the fireside in the living room, having as yet no table nor other room in which to write during the sharp winter. In this room his family must resort, though they break good manners, and make me many times forget what I would say, and say what I would not. But these hardships and inconveniences of living which the New England colonists met and overcame differ but little from those experienced in every new settlement. They have been paralleled again and again wherever Englishmen or Americans have wandered. In a few years after the coming of the ships much of the rawness and discomfort must have disappeared, certainly in the early settlements, and comparative comfort must have existed in most homes. If we could now lift the roof of the average 17th-century house in New England, it is certain that we should find disclosed not only comfortable conditions of living, but in many instances, a degree of luxury, with fine furnishings, that is appreciated by few at the present time. And this can now be shown by means of the itemized inventories of estates that were carefully made, listing the contents of a house, room by room, and enabling us to visualize the interiors of the homes in which lived the pioneers of New England. Parson Capon House, Tarpsfield. The parlor among the early settlements made in the colony of the Massachusetts Bay was one at Agawam, now the town of Ipswich. The news had reached Boston that the French were pushing their settlements westward along the coast, bringing with them divers priests and Jesuits, which so alarmed the governor and council that it was decided to forestall the French and hasten the planting of new towns north of Boston. The first move was to send the governor's son John, with 12 others, to establish themselves at Agawam. There were no roads, and so they sailed along the coast in a shallop and took possession of the town site in March, 1633. Their families and other settlers soon followed, and the increase of population was such that in August, 1634, the Court of Assistants decreed that the place be called Ipswich, after Old Ipswich in England, in acknowledgment of the great honor and kindness done to our people, who took shipping there. 3 months later, in November, 1634, one John Dillingham arrived in Ipswich, and the selectmen granted him 6 acres of land on which to build a house. He was from Leicestershire, and with his wife and daughter had come over in the fleet with Winthrop in 1630, and remained in Boston until he removed to Ipswich. Life in the frontier settlement was too severe for him, and he died during the next winter. On July 14, 1636, his widow, Sarah, made her last will and testament, being in perfect memory though my body be weak and sick, and a few days later she too was dead, leaving her orphan daughter to be cared for by Richard Saltonstall and John Appleton, under the direction of the Quarterly Court. And this was not at all difficult, for John Dillingham had left a goodly estate for the times. This Dillingham home has been selected for analysis because it is one of the earliest estates in the colony of which we have exact and detailed information, a number of documents relating to it having been preserved among the miscellaneous papers in the Massachusetts State Archives. 12. Moreover, it shows the furnishings and equipment of a settler living in a town of only 2 years' growth from the wilderness. The Dillingham homestead consisted of a house of 2 rooms and outbuildings with 30 acres of upland, 60 acres of meadow, i.e., grass land, and 6 acres of planting ground near the house, of which 4 acres were planted with corn. Apple trees and other fruits were fenced off in the garden. For livestock there was a mare, 3 cows, 2 steers, 2 heifers, 4 calves, and 4 pigs. There was an indentured servant, Thomas Downs, to help cultivate the land and care for the stock, and a maid, Antal, who not only helped with the housework, but also worked in the fields. "She hath been a faithful servant," wrote Richard Saltonstall, executor of the estate, "and though she was discharged by her mistress a little before her time was out, yet it may be borne by the estate, considering her diligence." And had come over in the ship Susan and Ellen, which arrived in April, 1635. Her passage cost £5. The Dillinghams occupied a good social position in the youthful settlement, but their 2-room house did not contain any really fine furniture. The parlour was also used as a bedroom, a practice which was common everywhere in the 17th century. It had 2 bedsteads valued at £1. 6, 8, a cupboard, 10s, a sea chest, 10s, 2 joined chairs, 5s, a round table, 7s, a desky, 4s, and a bandbox, 2s. There was also a large nest of boxes valued £2, and a small nest of boxes worth only 3 shillings. The feather beds, bolsters, and pillows on each bed were valued at about twice as much as a bedstead, and the coverlets averaged about £1 a piece. There were flaxen sheets for Mrs. Dillingham's bed, and coarse sheets for the beds of the maid and the indentured servant. A warming pan bears silent testimony to the cold of the winter season. Another bedstead valued at only 3 shillings may have been in the garret and occupied by Antal, the maid. A chest stood in the kitchen, more generally spoken of at that time as the hall, in accordance with the English usage, and 2 boxes, probably used for storage and also for seats. That was all the furniture listed in the kitchen that was considered of any value. The tables, stools, benches, shelving, or other furnishings seemingly necessary to housekeeping at that time either did not exist, or were so crude in construction as to have little or no value in estimating the estate. We find 5 cushions, however, valued at 15 shillings. Mrs. Dillingham died possessed of a few really fine furnishings, possibly treasured ancestral pieces, for she bequeathed a silver bowl to the wife of Richard Saltonstall, and to the wife of John Appleton she gave a silver porringer. It would be extremely interesting today to know what has become of these 2 pieces of colonial silver. No other silver is mentioned, but on shelving in the kitchen rested 40.5 pounds of pewter valued at £2. 14.0. As a pewter plate of the time weighs nearly 2 pounds and a platter much more, the supply of pewter for the table was not large. Wooden plates, trenchers, and bowls are not mentioned, but there were 25 pewter saucers, 6 porringers, 7 spoons, and 5 shillings worth of knives. As for table forks, they were practically unknown in the colony at that time. Governor Winthrop brought over a fork in 1630, carefully preserved in a case, which is supposed to be the first and only table fork in the colony in the earliest days of the settlements. Knives, spoons, and fingers, with plenty of napery, met the demands of table manners in the 17th century. The large fireplace in the kitchen had its usual equipment of pothooks, fire shovel and tongs, gridiron, trivet, and bellows, and beside it was an old dark lantern valued at only 2 shillings. There were iron pots, kettles, skillets and ladles, a brass pot and a mortar. There was a frying pan with a hole in it, and in a box were kept bullets, hinges and other small things. 2 beer vessels were listed, a case of bottles, 2 jugs, 3 pans, a tray, and 2 baskets. Such was the simple equipment of the Dillingham kitchen. There were plenty of tablecloths and napkins, but no curtains at any of the windows. If a broom were used, it probably was made of birch twigs bound together around a long handle. Candlesticks do not appear in the inventory, and the only store of food mentioned, aside from 21 new cheeses valued at £2. 16.0 was 7 bushels of rye, 2 firkins and a half of butter, a half bushel of malt, 6 pounds of raisins, and some spice. Our ancestors had a highly developed appreciation of the value of condiments. In a Salem inventory at a somewhat later date appear salt, pepper, ginger, cloves, mace, cinnamon, nutmegs, and allspice. Mrs. Dillingham's wearing apparel unfortunately is not listed item by item, but given a total value of £5. 8.4. Her linen amounted to an almost equal sum. Some of her deceased husband's clothing is included in the inventory, such as a coat with silver buttons, a red waistcoat, a suit of serge and a black suit of serge unmade, a jacket of cloth, and an old suit and cloak. Little Sarah Dillingham, the orphan child, when sent to school to Goodwife Simmons, was supplied with a stuff petticoat and waistcoat, and 4 shifts with shows, also a gown that cost £2. 10s. Perhaps after a time, she may have been able to read and fully appreciate the books formerly in her loving father's chest. They were Perkins' works in 3 volumes, Stephen treatises bound in 2 volumes, The Spouse Royal, The Bruised Red, and a Little New Testament. By way of contrast, let us glance at the inventory of the possessions of William Google of Lynn, who died in 1646, 10 years after Mrs. Dillingham had willed that her body be decently buried, and her child religiously educated if God give it life. Google left a house and 12 acres of land, and the total value of his possessions amounted to but £28. 11.7, with debts of £4. 9.7. He left a widow and 3 small children, and though dying in very lowly circumstances, he may have known better times, for John Marscole, the servant of Mr. Google of Lynn, was fined in 1643, for neglecting the watch. The title of honour, Mr., was used but sparingly in those early days and usually indicated a degree of social standing in the community. John Ward House, Salem, built in 1684, showing overhanging second story, gable windows and casement sash. Google had been a soldier, for among his personal belongings at death were a sword and belt, a musket and bandoliers, and also gunpowder. 1 cow and 4 hogs comprised his entire livestock, and 5 bushels of wheat, 10 bushels of Indian corn, and flax in the bundle lay in the garret of his house, which was frugally furnished with a chest, a chair, an old chair, a stool, and a trunk. The family probably slept on pallet beds made up on the floor, for bedding is listed but no bedsteads. They had a frying pan, a gridiron, a skillet, a posnet, an earthen pot, 6 spoons, and the following wooden ware, viz., 3 wood trays and 3 wood bowl and 3 wood dishes, 1s. 9d, 1 runlet, 1s, pails and tubs, 3s. 2 bags valued at 2 shillings, bring to a close the list of the earthly possessions of William Google of Lynn. When the inventory was brought into court, it very properly gave the goods to the widow, for the bringing up of her 3 small children. So reads the record. Doubtless there were many families in the colony little better conditioned, judging from the relatively small number of estates settled through the courts, when compared with the deaths and estimated population. Google's house and 12 acres of land were valued at only £8. This must have been a very simple, thatch roofed house of not more than 2 rooms, comparable with the outlying farmhouse of Jacob Perkins that was burned in Ipswich in 1668. And thereby hangs a tale. Master Perkins and his wife had gone to town one summer afternoon, leaving the house in charge of Mehetable Brabrook, a 16-year-old serving maid. We will let the ancient document in the court files relate what happened. About 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she was taking tobacco in a pipe, and went out of the house with her pipe, and got upon the oven on the outside and backside of the house, to look if there were any hogs in the corn. And she laid her right hand upon the thatch of the house, to stay herself, and with her left hand knocked out her pipe over her right arm upon the thatch on the eaves of the house, not thinking there had been any fire in the pipe, and immediately went down into the corn field to drive out the hogs she saw in it, and as she was going toward the rails of the field, she looked back, and saw a smoke upon her mistress' house in the place where she had knocked out her pipe, at which she was much frighted. 13. The wife of a neighbor came running to the assistance of Mehetable, and afterwards testified that when she reached the house she looked into both fireplaces, and saw no appearance of fire, only a few brands nearly dead under a great kettle hanging in the chimney. She also looked up into the chamber through the floorboards that lay very open on the side where the smoke was. Could photographs more vividly picture the scene? The thatch-roofed farmhouse had 2 rooms on the ground floor and a chimney with 2 fireplaces. An oven was built on the backside, probably having an opening inside the kitchen fireplace in the usual manner. The house was of but 1 story, judging from the low roof that the maid was able to reach when standing on the oven, and the floor of the chamber in the loft had wide cracks between the boards so that it was possible to look through from below and see the underside of the roof. In similar homes lived many a family in the early days in comparative comfort. As for the careless Mehetabel, she was brought before the quarterly court on suspicion of willfully setting the house on fire, a serious offence, which as late as 1821, was the cause of the execution in Salem of a 16-year-old boy. Among those who deposed at her trial was a young man, who said that as he and she were going into the meadow, before the fire, to make hay, she told him that her mistress was angry with her, but she had fitted her now, for she had put a great toad into her kettle of milk. As it turned out, the court ordered Mehetabel to be severely whipped and to pay £40 damages to her master Jacob Perkins. It now seems incredible that a serving maid of 1668 could ever get together so large a sum of money. The settlers in the New England colonies, unless persons of wealth or possessed of large families, during the early years lived generally in houses having but 1 room and an entryway on the ground floor. Above would be a chamber, sometimes only a garret. As the family increased in size and became more prosperous, another room would be added to the house on the other side of the entry and chimney, making the structure a so-called 2-room house. Still later, with the need for more room, a leanto would be built on the back of the house, thereby supplying 3 additional rooms on the ground floor with a kitchen in the middle. The earlier kitchen would then become a living room, or sitting room, in the New England phrase. This earlier kitchen was usually called the hall during the 17th century, and in it centered the life of the family. It was the room where the food was cooked and eaten. There the family sat, and there the indoor work was carried on. A loom sometimes occupied considerable space near a window, and frequently a bed was made up in a corner, on which the father of the family slept, and there sometimes also he died. The principal feature of this common room was its huge fireplace, in which hung pots and kettles suspended by means of pot chains and trammels from the hardwood trammel bar or lug pole that rested on wooden crossbars, and so bisected the wide flue in the chimney. These large fireplaces in the early days were sometimes called chimneys in the vernacular of the time. They were generally as wide as 8 feet, and a 10-foot opening is not unknown. This cavernous opening was spanned by a wooden lintel, a stick of timber sometimes 16 inches or more square, and when exposed to a roaring fire, piled high with logs, this became an element of danger, the charring wood smouldering all night and setting fire to the house. The trammel bar in the flue also caught fire not infrequently and gave way, allowing the pots and kettles to fall to the hearth, bringing disaster to the dinner, or to the curdling milk, and sometimes to those seated near. A trammel stick in the house of Captain Denny gave way from this cause, and a large kettle filled with wort 14 fell down and spilt the boiling liquid over 4 of his children, who were sitting or lying on the hearth, some of them asleep, which scalded them in so terrible a manner that one died presently after, and another's life is despaired of, continues the record. Here is good living for those who love good fires, wrote Higginson in his New England's Plantation, and under the spell of the glowing flames, the bare, whitewashed walls, the brown timbers and floorboards of the ceiling, the dress of pewter, and the simple furnishings of the room, enriched by the shadows, became a place full of cheer, a place where privation and homesickness might be forgotten in the glow of the bright firelight. On cold nights the short bench inside the fireplace was a chosen place, and the settle, a long seat made of boards with a high back to keep off the draught, was drawn before the fire, and here sat the older members of the family. The larger kettles hanging in the fireplace were of brass and copper, and some of them were of prodigious size. Hot water was always to be had, and these kettles also served for the daily cooking, the cheese-making, soap boiling, and candle dipping. Much of the food of the average New Englander until comparatively recent times consisted of cornmeal, boiled meats and vegetables and stews. Every well-equipped household had its spits for roasting and many had gridirons, but the usual diet of the average family was hasty pudding, cornmeal mush and milk, varied by boiled meat or fish served in the center of a large pewter platter, and surrounded by boiled vegetables. Baked beans and stewed beans appeared on the table several times every week in the year. Indian bannock, made by mixing cornmeal with water and spreading it an inch thick on a small board placed at an incline before the fire and so baked, was a common form of bread. When mixed with rye meal it became brown bread, and was baked in the brick oven with the beans and peas. John Ward House, Salem. The parlor. The brick oven was a feature of every chimney. Sometimes in early days it was built partly outside the house, but so far as known the opening was always in the kitchen fireplace. To reach it the housewife must stoop below the oaken lintel and stand inside the fireplace, taking care that her woolen skirts did not come near the flames. To heat it for a baking, a fire was built inside, usually with specially prepared pine or birch wood that had been split and seasoned out of doors for a short time and then housed. The oven was hot enough when the black was burned off the top and the inside had become a uniform light color. The fire and ashes were then taken out by means of a peel, a long-handled, flat-bladed shovel made for the purpose, and when dusted out with a broom made of hemlock twigs it was ready for the brown bread, beans, peas, Indian pudding, pies, and rye drop cakes which were made with rye meal, eggs and milk and baked directly on the bricks in the bottom of the oven. Potatoes and eggs were roasted in the ashes of the fireplace. Between the years of 1635 and 1655, court records and inventories of estates in the Massachusetts Bay Colony mention the following articles of food: bacon, beef, butter, cheese, eggs, fowls, lamb, milk, mutton, pork, suet, veal, wild game, and cod, herring, mackerel, salmon and sturgeon. Barley, beans, Indian beans, bran, cabbages, carrots, chaff, corn, English corn, Indian corn, hops, Indian meal, rye meal, oatmeal, oats, parsnips, peas, pump irons, rye, squashes, turnips and wheat. Apples, berries, fruit, honey, raisins, sugar and vinegar. Biscuit, blueman, bread, cake, malt, salad oil, porridge, rye malt, yeast, salt and many kinds of spices. Much of this food was raised on the farm, and nearly every family had its garden. Such articles of food as were imported were usually obtained at the shops in the larger towns by barter, as money was scarce. In 1651, a farmer from the frontier town of Andover came through the woods to Salem in his cart bringing 12 bushels of rye. He stopped at a shop owned by George Corwin, and from the daybook kept at the time and still carefully preserved, we learn that among other necessaries he carried home sugar for the good wife, and for the children, a doll and a bird whistle. In the early years domestic animals were too valuable to be killed for meat, but game was plentiful, and was roasted by being trussed on iron spits resting on curved brackets on the backs of the andirons. This, of course, required constant turning to expose the roast on all sides in order to cook it evenly, a task frequently delegated to a child. A skillet would be placed beneath to catch the drippings. Sometimes a bird was suspended before the fire by a twisted cord that would slowly unwind and partly wind again, requiring someone in frequent attendance to twist the cord. Families of wealth possessed a jack to turn the spit. This was a mechanism fastened over the fireplace and connected with the spit by means of a pulley and cord. A heavy weight suspended by a cord which slowly unwound supplied the power that turned the spit. At night, on going to bed, the fire was carefully covered with ashes in order to keep it for the next day. This was called raking up the fire. If through poor judgment the fire didn't keep, someone would go to a near neighbor to borrow coals, or if this was inconvenient, resort was then had to the tinder box. Tinder was made by charring linen or cotton rags, and the tinder box was kept in the niche on the inside of the fireplace, made by leaving out a couple of bricks. In the hall, usually upon open shelves, but sometimes upon a dresser, was displayed the pride of the housewife, the dress of pewter and Latin ware. China dishes, imported by the East India Company or made in Holland, were used sparingly during the early years of the colonies. There was much earthenware and stoneware, bottles and jugs, but it was woodenware and pewter that were commonly used. When Lionel Shute died in 1645, he bequeathed his silver spoon to his son James, 15. It was the only piece of silver in the house. Of pewter he died possessed of 14 dishes small and great, 11 pewter salts, saucers and porringers, 2 pewter candlesticks, and a pewter bottle. The widow Rebecca Bacon, who died in Salem in 1655, left an estate of £195. 8.6, which included a well-furnished house. She had brass pots, skillets, candlesticks, skimmers, a little brass pan, and an excellent supply of pewter, including 3 large pewter platters, 3 a size lesser, 3 more size lesser, 3 more size lesser, having a total value of £1. 16. She also had a pewter basin, 6 large pewter plates, and 6 lesser, 19 pewter saucers, 2 fruit dishes, an old basin and a great plate, 2 candlesticks, 1 large salt and a small one, 2 porringers, a great flagon, 1 lesser, 1 quart, 2 pints and a half pint, and an old porringer. She also left 1 silver jubal salt, 6 silver spoons, wine cup, and a dram cup of silver. Giles Badger of Newbury left to his young widow a glass bowl, beaker, and jug valued at 3 shillings, 3 silver spoons valued at £1, and a good assortment of pewter, including a salt cellar, a tunel and a great dowruff. The household was also furnished with 6 wooden dishes and 2 wooden platters. In other inventories appear unusual items such as a pewter brim basin, pewter cullenders, pewter beer cups, pans, and mustard pots. Pewter tankards were common. There were new and old-fashioned candlesticks. Pewter salts came in 3 sizes and the saucers were both small and large. In 1693, best London pewter plates cost the Boston shopkeepers 9.5 pence per pound in quantity. The 17th century hall must have had little spare room for its daily occupants, for in addition to its table and chairs, its settle, stools and wash bench, the long-ago inventories disclose such chattels as powdering tubs in which the salted meats were kept, the churn barrels containing a great variety of things, keelers and buckets, bucking tubs for washing, and the various implements used in spinning and weaving, washing and ironing, cooking and brewing, and the making of butter and cheese. In the chimney hung hams and bacon, and suspended from the ceiling were strings of dried apples and hands of seed corn. It is claimed by some that the floors were sanded. That certainly was true at a later period, but there are strong elements of doubt as to the prevalence of this custom during the 17th century. Sand, however, was used freely with homemade soft soap to scrub the floors, which were always kept white and clean, and whenever an early house is restored or taken down, sand is always found, sometimes in considerable quantity, where it has sifted down through the cracks between the floorboards. The downstairs rooms had double floors, but the chamber floors were made of one thickness of boards with here and there a knothole, and frequently with cracks between the boards through which the dust and dirt from above must have sifted down upon the heads of those seated at dinner, or engaged in their daily tasks in the rooms below. Not only does the structural evidence show this to be true, but a number of instances occur among the papers in court files, where witnesses have deposed as to what they had seen and heard through the cracks in chamber floors. A grandson of Governor Endicott once fell a victim of 2 gossiping 16-year-old girls who had spent some time on their knees peeping through the cracks in a chamber floor. Captain Richard Moore, the last survivor of the company on the Mayflower, late in life kept a tavern in Salem. He was spied upon in this manner, and eventually brought before the justices of the Quarterly Court to answer for his evasion of the law set forth and maintained at that time. John Ward House, Salem, the kitchen showing roasting jack, settle, birch broom, hands of seed corn, etc. The parlor, called the foreroom at a later time, was the room where guests of station were received. The best bed, hung with curtains and valance and covered with a rug, stood in a corner. In those days rugs were not used on floors, but as bed furnishings. Even the baby's cradle had its rug. Carpets, likewise, were too fine for wooden floors and were used as table covers. Of bedsteads there were many kinds, high and low, canopy, close, corded, half-headed, joint, side, standing, inlaid, and wainscot, and slipped under the higher bedsteads during the daytime, were trundle or truckle beds in which the children slept at night. Lionel Shute, the schoolmaster, had an old darnel coverlet on his bed, while some of his neighbours possessed branched and embroidered coverlets, and several had coverlets made of tapestry. Among the better families the parlour and chamber windows had curtains hung from rods. In the parlour stood one or more chests in which were stored the family clothing and bedding, for closets did not exist in the 17th century house. There were great chests and small chests, long boarded and great boarded chests, chests with a drawer, carved chests, wainscot chests, trunks, and boxes. A few stools and chairs, a looking-glass, a small table, and perhaps a cupboard completed the furnishings of the well-supplied parlour. In Captain George Corwin's best room there were chairs with leather bottoms and straw bottoms, a clock valued at £2, a screen having 5 leaves, a napkin press, and a scritcher or spice box. White calico curtains hung at his chamber windows, and the maid had a calico cubed cloth in her room. Parlour walls were whitewashed and bare of ornament. The first families owned a portrait or two in oils, and here and there a map in an glazed frame decorated a wall. The Puritan character did not warm to the fine arts, and austere living was the aim, if not always the achievement, of the time. The chambers in the second story must have been curiously furnished rooms, containing a huddle of stores of all descriptions. Henry Short, the town clerk of Newbury, died in 1673, leaving a goodly estate valued at nearly £2,000. He owned a negro slave, and his house was large and well furnished. There was an old parlour and a new parlour containing beds, chests, chairs, trunks, and boxes. In the chamber over the new parlour there was a good feather bed and bed clothing, but no bedstead. Wool and yarn were stored in this room together with boxes, tubs, some feathers, and miscellaneous lumber, the phrase of the period for odds and ends. The chamber over the kitchen, a comfortable room of course in winter, had its bed and bedding, also 5 hogsheads, 6 barrels, 5 iron hoops, a pair of stockcards, mill trough and other lumber, a parcel of old iron, a pike, a bed cord and other cordage. Small wonder in such a clutter that the rooms frequently had other tenantry than the human occupants. When Jasper Dancus arrived in Boston in 1680, the captain of the packet took him to his sister's house where he lodged. "We were taken to a fine large chamber," he writes, "but we were hardly in bed before we were shockingly bitten. I did not know the cause, but was not able to sleep. My comrade, who was very sleepy, fell asleep at first. He tumbled about very much, but I did not sleep any the whole night. In the morning we saw how it was, and were astonished we should find such a room with such a lady." 17. With the present widespread belief in Puritan austerity of character, there is associated a conception of a simplicity of dress and manners. But the channels of information by which present-day beliefs have been shaped usually have been ecclesiastical, and bias and convenient forgetfulness have been factors in outlining the composition of the picture. Human nature and human frailties were much the same in the 17th century as at the present time. In point of fact, our New England ancestors, when viewed as a body, are found to have had standards of living far below those of today. The common speech was gross in the extreme. Crowded living led to familiarity. There was more drunkenness, profanity, loose living and petty crime in proportion to the population than at the present time, and by no means did every one go to meeting on Sunday. The ministers controlled the lawmaking body, and sumptuary laws were enacted which are enlightening. Because of new and immodest fashions, the wearing of silver, gold and silk laces, girdles and hat bands was prohibited. It was the fashion at that time to slash the sleeves so that a fabric of another color worn beneath would show in an ornamental manner through the slash. The ministers decreed that neither man nor woman should wear clothing with more than one slash on each sleeve and another on the back. Cutworks, embroidered or needlework caps, bands and rails, were forbidden. 18 and ruffs and beaver hats were prohibited, as was long hair. Binding or small edging laces might be used, but the making or selling of bone lace was penalized at the rate of 5 shillings per yard. But this didn't change human nature, and although from time to time offenders were taken into court and punished, the wearing of fine clothing fashioned after the London mode continued, and a few years later the ministers tried their hand again. Any kind of lace was anathema, and no garment shall be made with short sleeves, whereby the nakedness of the arm may be discovered. On the other hand, large sleeves were forbidden, so the maids and good wives of the time must have been somewhat at a loss to know how lawfully to fashion their clothes. The minister at Ipswich grew so ill-tempered over the ungodly state of the women in his town that he vented his spleen as follows: "When I hear a nugibrous gentledame inquire what dress the Queen is in this week, what the nudiest tertian of the court, I look at her as the very gizzard of a trifle, the product of a quarter of a cipher, the epitome of nothing, fitter to be kicked, if she were of a kickable substance than either honoured or humoured." 19. The minister in the adjoining town, Rowley, actually cut off his nephew from his inheritance, because he wore his hair long in the prevailing fashion. Later in the century the offence of wearing long hair was forgotten in the unspeakable sin of wearing wigs. The Great and General Court again took a hand, and in 1675 condemned the practice of men's wearing their own or others' hair made into periwigs. Judge Sewell in his diary alludes to the custom. In 1685 3 persons were admitted to the Old South Church in Boston. 2 wore periwigs, comments the judge. 1708, August 20, Mr. Cheever died. The welfare of the province was much upon his spirit. He abominated periwigs. 20. The Great and General Court at one time ordered that no person should smoke tobacco in public under a penalty of 2 shillings and 6 pence, nor in his own house with a relative or friend. But everybody smoked who wanted to, even the maids, and the repressive legislation in time met the usual fate of similar efforts to restrain individual liberty and manners. It is sweet to fancy Priscilla, at her spinning wheel wearing the coif and nun-like garb of the Puritan maiden of the poet and the artist. But the inventories of estates in the early years of the colony, as well as at a later time, furnish evidence of a different character. The variety of fabrics listed is amazing and holds its own with the modern department store. There are most of the well-known fabrics of today, such as calico, cambric, challis, flannel, lawn, linen, plush, serge, silk, velvet, and many others, and there are also names that sound strangely in modern ears, viz. Cheney, Darnex, Dowlas, Genting, Inkle, Lockram, Arsembrike, Penistone, Perpetuana, Sempiternum, Stammel, and Water Paragon. John Ward House, Salem corner of the kitchen showing dresser with its dress of pewter, wash bench, meal chest, wooden ware, etc. As for dress, the women wore bonnets, caps, silk hoods, coifs, forehead cloths, ruffs, and whisks. Gowns, cloaks, mantles, and muffs are mentioned frequently, as are many kinds of lace and even fans and veils. Shawls and scarfs were not unknown, and there were gold, silver, and enamelled rings. At least one woman possessed a mask, and stomachers were not uncommon. Tortoise-shell combs appear, all well-to-do persons wore gloves, and as for shoes, there were shoes with French heels, fall shoes, and those with silver buckles. Even shoestrings appear in the inventories. There were silver, pewter, and steel buttons, and those of gimp, thread, and silk. Laboring men wore leather and coarse fabrics, and for others there were suits, doublets, waistcoats, and breeches. Trousers are mentioned, also a cane and periwigs. Of caps and hats there were a number of kinds: felt, castor, demi-castor, and even straw. Captain George Corwin, a Salem merchant, owned a cloth coat trimmed with silver lace, a velvet coat, a tabby doublet, an old-fashioned Dutch satin doublet, 4 cloaks of various kinds, 2 pairs of golden-topped gloves, 1 embroidered pair, and a pair with black fringe. He also took his walks abroad wearing silk stockings, with a hat encircled by a silver band and carrying a silver-headed cane, or a plate-hilt rapier, according to fashion. He possessed 2 silver watches. Who shall say that the men and women of the New England colonies did not dress well, and live well in the early days according to their means? What was their conduct not only in their homes, but in their relations with their neighbors? Did they live peaceably and work together in building up the settlements? Did they set up in the wilderness domestic relations exactly like those they had abandoned overseas? It was a raw frontier country to which they came, and it is apparent that at the outset they felt themselves to be transplanted Englishmen. So far as possible they lived the lives to which they had been accustomed, and they engrafted in their new homes the manners and customs of the generations behind them. Most of them fully recognized, however, that they were not to return, that they had cut loose from the old home ties, and it was not long before the necessities and limitations of frontier life brought about changed conditions in every direction. Politically, religiously and socially, they were in a different relation than formerly in the English parish life. Many of them, especially those somewhat removed from the immediate supervision of magistrate and minister, before long seem to have shown a tendency to follow the natural bent of the frontiersman toward independent thought and action. Their political leaders made laws restricting daily life and action, and their religious leaders laid down rules for belief and conduct that soon were repellent to many. Civil and clerical records are filled with instances showing an evasion of and even contempt for the laws and rules laid down by the leaders of their own choosing. Some of it doubtless was in the blood of the men who had come in search of a certain individual freedom of action, but much of it may be attributed to frontier conditions and primitive living. There were many indentured servants, and rough fishermen and sailors have always been unruly. Simple houses of but few rooms accommodating large families are not conducive to gentle speech, or modesty of manner, nor to a strict morality. The craving for land holding and the poorly defined and easily removed bounds naturally led to ill-feeling, assault, defamation, and slander. It has been stated frequently that in the olden times in New England every one was obliged to go to church. The size of the meeting houses, the isolated locations of many of the houses, the necessary care of the numerous young children, and the interesting sidelights on the manners of the time, which may be found in the court papers, all go to show that the statement must not be taken literally. Absence from meeting, breaking the Sabbath, carrying a burden on the Lord's Day, condemning the church, condemning the ministry, scandalous falling out on the Lord's Day, slandering the church, and other misdemeanors of a similar character were frequent. A curious instance of Sabbath breaking occurred at Hampton, N.H., in 1646. Aquila Chase and his wife and David Wheeler were presented at court for gathering peace on the Sabbath. They were admonished. The family tradition has it that Aquila returned from sea that morning, and his wife, wishing to supply a delicacy for dinner, fell into grave error in thus pandering to his unsanctified appetite. At the February 29, 1648 session of the court held in Salem, 8 cases were tried. A Gloucester man was fined for cursing, saying, "There are the brethren, the devil scald them." 4 servants were fined for breaking the Sabbath by hunting and killing a raccoon in the time of the public exercise to the disturbance of the congregation. If the animal had taken to the deep woods instead of staying near the meeting house, the servants might have had their fun without paying for it. Then came a Marblehead case, a man who had sailed his boat into the harbour loaded with hay that he had brought from Gloucester. This was on the Lord's Day at the time when people were going to the morning exercises. He, too, was fined. Nicholas Pinion, who worked at the Saugus Iron Works, was presented for absence from meeting 4 Lord's Days together, spending his time drinking and profanely, and Nicholas Russell of the same locality was fined for spending a great part of one Lord's Day with Pinion in drinking strong water and cursing Pinion's wife, thereby causing jealousy in the family, and the woman in question, having broken her bond for good behavior, was ordered to be severely whipped. The other cases were for swearing, in which the above-named lady was included, for being disguised in drink, and for living from his wife. And so the court ended. Drunkenness was very common in the old days. Every family kept on hand a supply of liquor and wine, and cider was considered a necessity of daily living in the country, where it was served with each meal, and also carried into the fields by the workers. It was stored in barrels in the cellar, and the task of drawing the cider and putting it on the table usually fell to the younger members of the family. A man would often provide in his will for the comfort of his loving wife by setting aside for occupancy during her life, 1/2 of his house, with a carefully specified number of bushels of rye, potatoes, turnips and other vegetables, the use of a horse with which to ride to meeting or elsewhere, and lastly, the direction that annually she be provided with a certain number of barrels of cider, sometimes as many as 8. Reverend Edward Holyoake, the president of Harvard College, was in the habit of laying in each year 30 or more barrels of cider, as he had to provide for much entertaining. Late in the winter he would draw off part of his stock, and into each barrel he would pour a bottle of spirit, and a month later some of this blend would be bottled for use on special occasions. Well curb at the John Ward House showing well sweep, wooden bucket, and girl dressed in the costume of the late 17th century, as an example of life and manners in 17th century New England. The ministerial experiences of Tarpsfield may be cited. It is an inland town near Ipswich, and was settled in 1639. The first minister was the Reverend William Perkins, who had been a selectman and representative at Weymouth, and a member of the Ancient and Honourable Artillery Company in Boston. Later he preached at Gloucester, where one of his flock was presented at court for unbecoming speeches against Mr. Perkins, saying, if it were not for the law, she would never come to the meeting. The teacher was so dead, affirming that the teacher was fitter to be a lady's chambermaid than to be in the pulpit. 21. He removed to Tarpsfield in 1656, and before long was collecting his salary through the courts. Some of his flock retaliated and brought him into court for drunkenness, when it appeared that he had stopped at the Malden Ordinary, and called for a cup of sack, but Goodyhill told him that he had had too much already, and Master Perkins replied, if you think I am drunk let me see if I can not go, and he went tottering about the kitchen, and said the house was so full of pots and kettles that he could hardly go. In 1663 a meeting house was built in Tarpsfield, and the Reverend Thomas Gilbert, a Scotchman, supplanted Mr. Perkins. The new minister also had a love for good wine, and after a time Mr. Perkins entered a complaint, and it appears from the records that one sacrament day Mr. Gilbert entertained at dinner a number of the older men and women whose homes were distant from the meeting house. He possessed a golden cup, and what was left of the sacramental wine was drunk at dinner, the cup being passed around the table at least twice, the minister drinking deeply, with the not unusual result, for he forgot to give thanks and sang a psalm with lisping utterance. Mr. Gilbert was followed in his pastorate by the Reverend Jeremiah Hobart, a Harvard graduate, who, during his 8-year stay in Tarpsfield, became a familiar figure in the courts because of suits for non-payment of salary, for cursing and swearing, and for a damaging complaint for slander exhibiting much discreditable testimony. Then came the Reverend Joseph Capon, and during his pastorate of over 40 years the town and church enjoyed a peaceful growth interrupted only by the witchcraft delusion of 1692, in which an attempt to appropriate land of Tarpsfield men played an important part. But manners and crimes vary with the centuries as do dress and speech. In the year 1655, the following crimes were penalized in the courts of the Massachusetts Bay Colony: eavesdropping, meddling, neglecting work, naughty speech, profane dancing, kissing, making love without consent of friends, uncharitableness to a poor man in distress, carelessness about fire, wearing great boots, etc. And a few years later we find other strange misdemeanors, such as abusing a mother-in-law, wicked speeches against a son-in-law, kicking another in the street, leaving children alone in the house, pulling hair, riding behind two fellows at night. This was a girl, Lydia by name, sleeping in meeting and dissenting from the rest of the jury. With such minute supervision of the daily life of the colonists, it can readily be appreciated that it was an age for gossiping, meddlesome interference with individual life and liberty, and that in the course of time nearly every one came before the courts as complainant, defendant or witness. There were few amusements or intellectual diversions, and they could only dwell on the gossip and small doings of their immediate surroundings. But all the while there was underlying respect for law, religion and the rights of others. The fundamental principles of human life were much the same as at the present day, and men and women lived together then as now and as they always will, with respect and love. An account of supplies furnished by the Company of the Massachusetts Bay to Rev. Samuel Skelton, the minister at Salem. The following account of food, fabrics, Household supplies and equipment furnished by the Company of the Massachusetts Bay to Reverend Samuel Skelton, the first minister at Salem, is of much economic interest. The emigrants sailed from London about the middle of April, 1629, and reached the harbour of Naumkeag, now Salem, on June 30. Mr. Skelton died August 2, 1634, and this accounting may have been made up after his death. It begins in 1629, at the time of the departure from England, and covers an indeterminate period. The increase of livestock over a period of 5 years is described, and this seems to indicate the period of residence at Salem until his death. It is enlightening to find that the Massachusetts Bay Company seems to have maintained a company shop, at which supplies of all kinds might be obtained, and it is a matter for comment that the minister's family was supplied during the voyage and in the early days following the settlement, with such luxuries as powdered sugar, salad oil, Castile soap and almonds, not to mention, also, a variety of spices, such as pepper, cloves, mace, and nutmegs. The original of this document may be seen in the Suffolk County Court Files, Volume 1. Other interesting lists of all kinds of materials sent over by the company may be found in the company records printed by the Commonwealth in 1853, Volume 1, pp. 23-37, and also by the American Antiquarian Society Transactions, Volume 3, pp. 5-30e. Cop pie of an account of moneys Mr. Skelton is creditor viz. Lee S. D. Anno 1629 imprimus p. so much wch. Should a howe bene paid him in England a 20-00-00 towards fitting him for ye voyage, item for charges, att Tilbury, Cowes, and Plymouth, being windbound the 2nd of October, 2000 item p. 20 li p. annum, for 3 years, is ye sum of 60-00-00 item, for on bushel of wheat flour 00-15-00 ite. For 1 bushel of oatmeal 00-10-00 ite. For 1 Holland and 2 ordinary cheese 00-10-00 ite. For XXLI of powder sugar att the 1st of March, 09 ite. For 1 loaf cont 7 li att 1's 60 the 6th of October, 2000 ite. For 1 sugar loaf cont 5 li att 1's 7 dp li the 11th of July, 2000 ite. 6 li of pepper 00-12-00 ite. Nutmegs 4 ounces the 8th of January, 2000 ite. 1 ounce of cloves, and 1 ounce of mace 00-02-00 ite. Igely of starch the 3rd of January, 2000 ite. Zidgely of rice 00-06-00 ite. VJLI of Vientride suet 00-03-00 ite. 1 gall of aquavite the 8th of March, 2000 ite. For 1 flitch of bacon 00-14-00 ite. Castle soap Ixley att 8 dp li 00-06-00 ite. Fruit viz raisins corants, and pruins 00-14-00 ite. Saffron IJ ounce 00-05-00 ite. 5 chew of stronge water 00-08-00 ite. Almonds Igely at 1's 2d the 4th of February, 2000 ite. XVLI of trite suet, at 8 dp, li 00-10-00 ite. 1 gall of salad oil 00-06-00 ite. VJLI of candles 00-03-00 ite. V geese and 9 ducks 00-08-00 anno 1630 ite. Zidgely of butter att 00-08-00 ite. VJ pots of butter contents Vigila P pot the 1st of August, 2000 ite. IJ cheeses about X Leah PC the 8th of November, 2000 ITE. Half a firkin of butter of Mr. Gibbs 00-17-06 ITE. 1/3 PRT of a barrel of wheat biscuit 00-10-00 ITE. 1 pot of honey vigili watt ATT the 10th of July, 2000 ITE. 1 pot of butter ATT 00-03-00 ITE. XLI of Corants ATT 00-05-00 ITE. Bacon 00-10-00 ITE. 1 doz of candles 00-08-00 ITE. IJ cheeses ATT VJDP Lee the 3rd of November, 2000 ITE. IIJ cheeses ATT Vij P. Lee 00-17-09 ITE. 1 porket the 1st of May, 2000 ITE. Zijli of Trite Suet 00-08-00 ITE. VJGs and Shij Ducks 00-14-00 ITE. VJ Po of powder sugar about 20D 00-10-00 ITE. VPO of powder sugar 18D the 6th of July, 2000 ITE. XLI of loaf sugar 0100-00 ITE. Cloves and mace 00-01-00 ITE. IJ ounce of nutmegs JS and cinnamon 16D the 4th of February, 2000 ITE. Workman's wadges for cutting and bringing home, wood against winter about 03-00-00 Summa Tollis 105, 18, 11 item, so much PD Mr. Pierce. 22 for provisions of meal, piece, canvas, Kasi and ETCR WTH 3 Lee 5s 9D after 25 Lee cent and freight. I say PD the sum of the 15th of December, 01 ITE. For 3 quarts of aquavite the 9th of March, 2000 ITE. For XLI of rice ATT 5D the 2nd of April, 2000 ITE. 10 Lee of but herb ATT the 8th of June, 2000 ITE. 4 cheese S ATT the 1st of March, 04 ITE. 10 pieces of pork the 8th of November, 2000 ITE. More 20 Lee of butter 00-10-00 ITE. More 4 bushels Virginia corn 02-00-00 ITE. Soap 7s and vinegar 4 gallo 8s, and 1 gallon to 00-17-00 ITE. 2 peck of weight saute ATT 3 minutes Sumis 18-14-08, and on the other side the total sum of 105, 18, 11 Summa to Lees 124, 13, 07 Now ye increase the first year next after the receipt of the 2 heifers, both the calves miscarried, one about a quarter old died, the other near upon a year old lost by the wolves. The second year there was a heifer calf and a bull calf. WCH heifer is now in my hands, and the bull calf Mr. Skelton sold ATT 1 year and 3/4 old for £8. The third year was which the beginning of winter way both eaten with the wolves. Now since the 3 foresaid years, the next year after was 2 bull calves, and an heifer calf, the springe before Mr. Skelton's death. And this year since was 3 bull calves 2 whereof are dead, the one when it was about 20 and 2 weeks old, the other since winter did begin. Now for the keeping of the cattle WCH should how a been ATT the company's charge, Ath Holy Lion VPON versus Mr. Skelton's account WTH the company Mr. Skelton is DPR Visley S. D 14 yards of Dutch surge received ATT the 2nd of May, 09 it. 17 yards of fustian ATT the 1st of July, 2000 it. 11 yards of weight English irons 00-13-09 it. 12 yards of red pea pechuana the 16th of January, 2000 it. 12 yards of green say the 13th of January, 2000 it. 12 yards of yellow say the 13th of January, 2000 at 12 elms of lin, torn, men 00-14-00 it. 14 elms newis, torn, lane the 17th of January, 04 it. 20 elms OFLOC, crum the 1st of May, 10 it. 20 elms stripped, Lindsay, Woolsey the 1st of September, 04 it. Yards, torn, buckram the 3rd of May, 2000 it. 1 piece of Norwich Surg 00-15-00 it. 20 elms of Lockram the 1st of May, 10 it. 15 yards of weight flannel 00-15-00 it. 20 elms of coarse canvas 0104, torn vit. 1 pound of Walbone 0, torn, the 20th of November, 2000 item so much PD Mr. Rennell PRT of Mr. Pierce's bill, the sum of 08-00-00 item 9 Li of iron ATT 3D, is the 3rd of February, 2000 it. 1 SYTH 00-03-00 it. 1 fishing line 00-03-00 it. 30 pound oakum the 6th of July, 2000 it. 2000 nails 6 DPC, 00-10-00 it. 600 nails 10 DPC, the 5th of May, 2000 it. 1 ream of paper 00-10-00 item, borrowed of CP Endicott of Yecomp. 7 YRDS of Bays ATT, to 60 yard, is 00-17-06 half a Elney of Fustian ATT, 00-00-10 it. 2 yards and half of yellow Kasi 3s 4D the 4th of August, 2000 Summa Tollis ST 031-19-05 ITE. 2 gall of Methaglen 00-08-00 it. 1 Lethia Jack the 6th of January, 2000 it. 2 tubs o it. 1 wooden hand belay ITE. Vinegar o the 6th of March, 2000 it. 3 pewter bottles quartz o it. 1 pinty pewter bottle 00-00-10 ITE. 1 hat 00-10-00, the 3rd of March, 33 rec of Mr. Winthrop Governor ITE. 3 YRDS of cambric 6 YRDS, and AH. Of loomwork 2 drinking horns 8 PR of shoes for men 6 PR of grey stockings, for men 6 PR of stockings for women 6 PR of stockings for children 10 YRDS of Kasi thread 2000 of pins 6 awls 1 web of blue gartering 2 knots of tape. An invoice of English goods shipped to New England about 1690. In July, 1694, suit was brought in the court at Boston, by John Caxey of London, England, against Joseph Mallinson of Boston, to whom the London merchant had consigned various goods for the Boston market. The shipment consisted of a great variety of clothing, fabrics, hardware, implements, kitchen utensils and pewter. Mallinson not having remitted for the goods, suit was bought and a copy of the invoice was presented at court, and is still preserved among the Massachusetts State Archives. This document throws considerable light on the furnishings of the colonial home at that time and the prevailing scale of prices. Invoice and contents of sundry goods laden on board the good ship called the Friendship Captain John, where commander bound from this port of London for Boston, in New England, and goes consigned to Mr. Joseph Mallinson, for the proper accompt and risk of John Caxey. 1 large fat QT felt and castor hats as vist number 1. Number 1 3 dollars. Boys felts edged and lind at 14 a p dollars. Pound 2.0 2.023 dollars. Ditto at 16 p dollars. 2.0 8.033 dollars. Ditto at 18 p dollars. 2.14.043 dollars. Ditto at 20 a p dollars. 3.00.054 dollars. Men's felts at 34s 6.16.06 10 dollars. Ditto at 40s p dollars. 20.00.073 dollars. Ditto at 48s p dollars. 7.04.083 dollars. Men's Carolinas, at 8/6 pps, 15.06.014 dollars. men's casters at 5/6 13.04.023 DOS. Ditto at 6/6 11.14.032 DOS. Ditto at 7/9 9.06.042 DOS. Ditto at 9 10.16.051 DOS. Ditto at 11 6.12.06 DOS. Rubus at 15 dp DOS. 0.07.66 DOS. Ditto at 2/6 p DOS. 15.00.0 A large fat cost 12s, 12.00.0 pound 112.16.61 Small case hair powder. And wash balls number 1. 4 DOS and half of sweet hair powder at 8 d DOS. 1.16.03 Li of best damask powder at 3 p Li 0.09.07 Gross wash balls at 8 dpgs. 2.16.0 a case, cost to 0.02.05.03.62 HHDS ternary, where number 1 and 2 as vist and 7 bundles of steel shoe shovels, and spads number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 3-pottle ton cans at the 3rd of September, 2002 DOS. Fine pint ton cans at 18.00.006 quart ton cans at 6.0033 pint ton cans at 4.004 snap mouse traps 1.004 double 4 mouse traps at 2.022 single 4 mouse traps at 1.042 large single 4 mouse traps at 1.064 wooden rat traps with springs at 5.001 DOS. Punch strainers set up 2.099 DOS. 6 best maple trenchers at 30 p DOS. The 1st of June, 11.1 DOS. Milk trays at 11.003 DOS. Platters at 6 18.003 DOS. Hand bowls at 3/6 10.061 DOS. Porridge dishes at 11.042 DOS. Handle bowls at 8 p DOS. 16.002 DOS. Carved spoons at 6 dp DOS. 1.006 DOS. Beer taps at 3 dp DOS. 1.065 gs, 2 DOS. Plain spoons at 2/6 p Grow 12.111 gs. Coarse hair cottons combed at 2/9. The 13th of January, 2001 gs. Midle hair cottons combed at 3/3. The 19th of January, 2006 DOS. Large hair strainers at 2 p DOS. 12.003 DOS. Small hair ditto at 18 dp DOS. 4.062 DOS. Midle bellows at 18 p DOS. The 16th of January, 2001 DOS. 6. Small ditto at 16 p DOS. The 1st of April, 2001 DOS. Sucking bottles at 12.001 DOS. Large ladles at 1s8 1.081 DOS. Small ditto 1.0012 DOS. Steel shod shovels and spads at 16 at the 9th of December, 2002 HHDS, cost 7s each 14.00. The 25th of March, 10 case looking glasses number 3 as number 1 6 dressing glasses 10 inches in sight at 5 PS 1.10.026 ditto at 6 PS 11 inches in sight 1.16.036 ditto at 7s PS 12 inches in sight 2.0 glasses in large frames at 15 PS 12 inches 2.05.053 ditto at 18s PS 14 inches in sight 2.14.06 2 ditto at 22s PS 16 inches in sight 2.04.07 2 ditto at 28s PS 18 inches in sight 2.16.08 2 ditto at 35 ZPS 20 inches 3.10.0 a case cost 5s 5.0 19.02.01 case number 2 QT as vis number 1 2 periwigs at 18s PPS 1.16.0 2 ditto at 2s 2.00.03 1 ditto at 25s 1.05.0 1 ditto at 30s 1.10.0 6.11.0 number 1 2 DOS child wall hose at 5s p DOS 10.022 DOS ditto at 6/8 13.431 DOS ditto at 8 8.041 DOS ditto at 10 10.052 DOS Women's wool ditto at 9/6 19.062 DOS. Ditto at 10/6 1.01.071 DOS. Ditto at 11/6 11.681 DOS. Ditto at 13/6 13.691 DOS. Ditto men's wool at 13.010 2 DOS. Ditto at 15/6 1.11.011 2 DOS. Ditto at 18 1.16.012 1 DOS. Ditto at 20 1.00.013 1 DOS. Ditto black at 22 1.02.014 1 DOS. Women's worst ditto at 29 1.09.015 1 DOS. Men's short worst mixed at 36 1.16.016 1 DOS. Ditto at 38 1.18.017 1 DOS. Ditto at 43 2.03.018 1 DOS. Ditto black at 40 2.00.019 1 DOS. Men's mixed roll at 45 2.05.021 DOS. Ditto at 52 p DOS. 2.12.021 1 DOS. Ditto blah and blue at 52 2.12.01 case cost WTH cords 2 at 2.0 to 8.05.431 coils of cordage cont as VIX number 1 3-inch 1/4 QT the 3rd of February 0921 ditto 4 inches the 4th of January 2003 1 ditto 5 inches the 6th of January 0641 ditto 5 3/4 inches the 8th of February 0251 ditto 6 the 9th of January 2561 coil 3 the 2nd of March 2571 coil 2 3/4 the 2nd of February 0881 coil 2 1/4 the 1st of March 1391 coil 2 1/2 2.00.1010 1 coil 2 1/2 2.00.1211 1 coil 2 1/4 the 1st of March 2312 1 ditto 2 1/2 2.00.1713 1 ditto 2 3/4 the 2nd of February 0414 1 ditto 3 inches the 3rd of January 0215 2 ditto 2 2.00.2516 2 ditto 2 2.00.1217 2 ditto 2 2.00.2118 2 ditto 2 2.00.1319 2 ditto 1 inch 1/2 the 1st of February 2422 ditto 1 1/2 the 1st of January 1321 3 ditto 1 1/4 the 1st of March 2022 2 ditto 1 3/4 the 1st of March 1123 3 coils 1 1/4 the 1st of February 27 1 cable 8 inches 3/4 19.00.1425 1/2 the 7th of February 26 1 ditto 4 1/2 the 5th of January 22 1 ditto 4 3/2 the 5th of March 07 1 coil 2 3/4 the 2nd of January 11 1 coil 2 3/4 the 2nd of January 11 1 coil 2 1/4 the 1st of January 08 for a lighter to carry it on board 15.001 HHD number 4 QT Rot. Brass and wrought iron work, as Vis 12 brass kettles QT1C. 0.4 Li at 15 dp Li 7.05.0, 2 PR of 8 square monument candlesticks 15.0, 2 PR, ditto at 612.0, 2 PR ditto at 5's 10.0, 2 PR ditto at 4's 8.0, 2 PR ditto at 3/6 7.0, 2 PR ditto at 3/6.0, 2 PR of 4 square, ditto at 7 of 14.0, 2 PR of ditto at 612.0, 2 PR of round ditto at 3/6 7.0, 2 PR of ditto at 4's 8.0, 2 PR ditto at 4's 6 9.0, 2 PR ditto at 5 or 10.0, 2 PR ditto at 5/6 11.0, 2 PR ditto at 6/6 13.06 DOS. Iron SPR candlesticks at 5/6 1.13.02 fine. Mortars and pastels at 4 8.0, 2 ditto at 4/6 9.0, 2 ditto at 5/6 11.0, 2 ditto at 7/3 14.6 1 dozen flower boxes 11.0 1 DOS pepper boxes 6.05 DOS brass snuffers at 7/6 1.17.66 snuffers stands at 10.64 snuffers pans at 4.81 DOS Bafer fork 7.01 DOS grid irons WTA 98 ribs 17.0 18 plain bellows 1.0 $3.04 Alchemy spoons at 12/9 $11.0 $2 Ditto at 2/3 $4.61 Brass extinguishers 3.06 Brass ladles at 6/6D 3.36 Ditto at 9D 4.66 Ditto at 14D 7.06 Slices at 7D 3.66 Ditto at 9 $4.62 Brass savealls at 5s $PDOS 10.03 Ditto at 4 $12.03 Ditto at 3/6 $10.62 Ditto at 3 $6.01 Double Iagas $6.01 Ditto at $6.02 Single Ditto at 3s 9 $7.62 Small minces at 7s $14.01 Large Ditto at $15.61 Chopras $12.01 Cleavers $17.63 Small padlocks at 5 6 $16.62 Ditto at 6 $PDOS $12.02 Ditto at 7/9 $PDOS $15.61 Ditto at 9.610 Skewers WTH frame $16.62 Small SPR Locks at 8s $PDOS $16.02 Jubal SPR locks at 17 $PDOS 1.14.04 Bundles frying pans QT1C 1 26 Li at 45 3.09.61 HHD cost 6.0 the 5th of November 41 1 trunk number 1 QT nothing but buttons as this number 112 GS GIMP fallow breast at 9 DP grow 9.0 248 GS GYMP fallow coat at 1.11 D 2.04.03 34 bags coat pillars QT 136 grow 18 DP grow 10.04.04 10 gross blah hair best at 20 D 16.85 10 bags best pillars coats QT 40 grow at 23 D 3.16.86 24 gross silk brown best at 23 D 2.06.07 13 bags QT 52 gross of Accor coats 2/6 PGS 6.10.08 12 gross blah hair Milo coats 3D 1.19.09 20 gross cut hair coats at 3/10 PGS 3.16.8 10 30 gross large silk coats at 3/10 5.15.0 a trunk and cords cost 15 of 15.0 38.12.01 large HHD number 3 QT of Tinnery where as vis 6 lanterns at just 3 DPL 13.65 Ditto at 21D 10.66 Ditto at 18D 9.0 2 large fish kettles and plates at 5s 10.0 2 small Ditto at 3 6.0 2 DOS slices at 2/6 5.06 large pastry pans at 22D 11.0 6 small Ditto at 14D 7.03 sets kettles at 1.0 1.0 3 DOS pocket graters at just PDOS 6.03 DOS Ditto at 20D 5.01 DOS large square pudding pans at 14s 14.01 DOS Ditto small at 12D 12.06 pair of snuffers and pans at 18D P 9.06 hanging candlesticks at 12D 6.02 DOS large coiners at 4s 8.03 DOS Midal Ditto at 3s 9.02 DOS small Ditto at 2 4.06 large funnels at 9 DPS 4.6 2 DOS quart Ditto at 6 PDOS 12.0 2 DOS pint Ditto at 4 PDOS 8.0 2 DOS Ditto at 2/6 5.0 2 DOS Ditto at 2 4.0 1 DOS large saucepans at 8 DPPS 8.02 DOS quart Ditto at 6 DPPS 12.02 DOS point Ditto at 4/6 9.02 DOS flour boxes at 3/6 7.02 DOS pepper boxes at 2/6 5.04 large dripping pans at 2/3 9.06 small Ditto at 20D 10.01 DOS quart pots at 6 DPS 6.02 DOS pint Ditto at 4 PDOS 8.01 DOS large round pudding pans 13D 13.01 DOS Ditto small at 11D 11.01 DOS candlesticks at 6 DPS 6.06 Planish candlesticks at 8D 4.01 DOS. Casting ladles at 4 DPS 4.01 DOS. Bread graters at 7 DPS 7.01 DOS. Ditto at 4 DPS 4.01 DOS. Tinder boxes, and at 8's 8.08 candle boxes, at 14 DPS 9.46 round fish plates, at 11 DPS 5.66 colanders, at 16 DPS 8.01 DOS half pint pots, at 2 DPS 2.0 a large cask cost 9's 9.0 8.04.41 bale of stuffs, and number 8 QT, as this number 112 PS worst. Fancies at 20's 12.00.023 woolen shades, at 22's PS 3.00.036 plain silk crepes, at 23 PS 6.18.046 stripped worsted crepes, at 23 6.18.052 strip tee silk crepes, at 26 2.12.064 spotted strip tee silk crepes, at 26 5.04.07 2 satin strip tee crepes, at 28 a 2.16.08 10 strip tee druggets, at 28 14.00.093 woolen damask, at 29's 4.07.010 6 mixed serges, at 30th 9.00.011 2 strip tee ditto, at 33's 3.06.013 10 silk fancies, at 36 PS 18.00.014 6 Ephigianes, at 38 PS 11.08.015 6 silk damask, at 46 13.16.016 3 strip tee camblets, at 46 6.18.017 1 mock calaminco, at 3.0.0.018 1 right ditto 4.00.019 3 roll PS. Silk fancies QT 37:37:37-1-2 is 111.5 yards, at 18D 8.07.321 PS, red flannel QT 20, 21 1 PS, yellow ditto QT 21, 110 yards, at 14D 6.08.422 1 PS, ditto QT 25, 23 1 PS, white QT 44, pieces 92A cord, and canvas paper, and packing 1.04.04 DOS. Of course hose in ditto bale. 146.14.71 Droom fat number 2 containing pewter, as vis 12 pottle tankards, at 3's 10 DPS, 2.06.012 quart ditto, at 3's 1.16.024 midle ditto, at 2/6 3.00.024 small ditto, at 2.08.012 DOS. Large pouring is at 9/6 DP, DOS. 5.14.012 DOS. Small ditto at 8. 4.16.03 PR new fashioned candlesticks, at 4's 12.03 PR, ditto, at 3's 9.02 PR, round ditto, at 2's 10D 5.8 a fat cost 7.01 Droom fat number 3 QT, more pewter vist 18 large chamber pots, at 2. 10 SPS 2.11.030 middle ditto, at 2's DD 3.10.040 small ditto, at 2's 4.00.012 DOS Alkner spoons, at 2/9 1.13.024 DOS powder ditto, at 2. 3 DP DOS 2.14.012 large salts, at 2's 2 PS 1.06.024 middle ditto, at 20 DPS 2.00.048 small ditto, at 12 DPS 2.08.018 basins QT 32 and a half, at 12D 1.12.62 DOS. Sauces at 9's P DOS. 18.04 DOS small ditto, at 7's P DOS 1.08.02 pottle wine measure pots, at 5/6 11.06 quart ditto, at 2/8 16.06 pint ditto pots, at 22 DPS 11.06 half pint ditto, at 14 D 7.06 quartern ditto pots, at 9 DPPS 4.6 a fat cost 7.01 half barrel fat. Number 4 Cont more pewter no a 78 dishes QT 265 Li 9D 1 half 10.09.9-1 2A fat cost 3s, 6 £3.6 76.0, 2.5-1, 2-1 bale of linseed wool Zacont 30 PS number 7 at 31s PS 4 6.10.0 canvas, and CA 1.07.0, 47.17.0, 2 large bales of Curzes No. 4:5 This No A3 browns, 1 grey, at 26 PPS 5.04.0 B3 brown, 1 grey, at 28 PS 5.12.0 C1 brown, 3 greys, at 36.00.0 D4 browns at 31 6.04.0 E4 browns at 32 6.08.0 F3 browns, 2 greys, at 35s 10.10.0 G4 browns, 2 greys, at 37s 11.02.0 H4 browns, 2 greys, at 38s 11.08.0 I6 browns at 39s 11.14.0 K3 browns, 2 drabs, at 42s 12.12.0 grey, L6 Hunley reds at 42s 12.12.0 M2 greys, 1 drab, 3 browns, at 43s PS 25.16.06 Nap T, N3 browns, 2 greys, at 58s PS 14.08.01 drab, O3 browns, 3 greys, at 55s PS 20 yards long 6.10.0 canvas cord paper, and packing 38s P bale 3.16.0 159.16.0 1 bale of cottons of several collars vis 6 white cottons at 15 of 4.10.06 white ditto at 26.00.06 red ditto, 5 blue ditto, 5 cloth colored ditto, at 17s PPS 19.11.05 ash colored ditto, 2 yellow ditto, 4 red ditto at 23s PS 4.12.0, 1 blue ditto at 24, 1.04.0 canvas, and packing 1.18.037.15.01 HHD number 5 Cont sundry lots of goods, as this 12 hogskin saddles, stirrups, leathers bridles, girths and snaffles at 14s 8.08.0 number 18 Lee whited brown thread, at 2/3 13.620 Lee ditto at 2/6 15.022 Lee ditto at 2/10 17.024 Lee ditto at 3/3 19.626 Lee ditto at 3/8 1.02.028 Lee ditto at 4s P Lee the 4th of January, 0. 415 3 Lee nuns thread at 6 18.0510 3 Lee ditto at 7s P Lee the 1st of January, 0. 610 3 Lee ditto at 8 the 4th of January, 0. 810 1 Lee ditto at 10s P Lee October 0. 910 1 Lee ditto at 12 for December 0. 1210 1 Lee ditto at 16.0 number 16 DOS best brown thread at 22 P DOS 6.12.0 23 DOS color ditto at 26 P DOS 3.08.034 DOS blue and collared tape at 9/6 1.18.042 DOS blue and collared filleting at 13/6 1.07.051 DOS white filleting at 15p 15.06 2 DOS fine white twist at 3 of 4d 6.87 2 DOS narrow Holland tape at 7s P DOS 14.08 2 DOS broad ditto at 10 P DOS 1.00.09 3 gross cotton 6d rib bin at 10s P grow 1.10.010 1 PS broad strip T 12d rib bin at 4/6 4.611 2 DOS pins, at 6/8 P DOS 12.012 3 dozen ditto, at 7/2 P DOS 1.0 1.613 4 mil needles at 5 a P mil 1.00.014 2 gross women's brass thimbles at 5/6 11.015 6 DOS. Men's steel ditto at 7s PGS 3.616 6 dozen horn combs at 14D 7.017 6 DOS. Ditto at 18D 9.018 6 DOS. Ditto at 22D 11.019 2 dos ivory combs at 3/6 p dos 7.022 dos ditto at 6/8 12.021 old brass curtain rings at 14d 7.022 2 dozen small inkhorns at 20d 3.423 1 dos large ditto 2.924 1 dos large sands at 4s 4.025 2 grow tin breast buttons 12d 2.026 6 grow large ditto at 15d 7.627 6 grow ditto at 18d grow 9.028 2 grow L thread laces at 2/4 4.829 2 grow ditto yard and 1/2 at 3/8 6.031 grow ditto silk 2 yards at 30s 1.10.01 HHD cost 5 of 5.0 trunk number 231 6 grow large white waistcoat buttons at 15d 7.632 6 grow fine small ditto at 18d 9.033 2 grow gilt sleeve buttons at 3/4 6.834 1 dos blah velvet marks lin WTH 14.035 1 dos best ditto at 15.036 1 dos best ditto lind WTH silk at 22s 1.0 1 dos calico quilted caps at 9s 9.038 1 dos Holland ditto at 12 p dos 12.039 18 yards grey lace at 3d 4.640 20 yards ditto at 4d p yard 6.841 33 yards ditto at 4d minus 1 divided by 2 12.4-1 242 15 yards ditto at 5d p yard 6.343 12 yards ditto at 6d 6.044 16 yards ditto at 8d 10.845 34 yards blah silk bone lace at 5d minus 1 divided by 2 p yard 15.746 42 yards ditto at 7d minus 1 divided by 2 1.06.347 24 yards ditto at 12d 1.04.048 16 yards ditto at 13d 17.449 18 yards ditto at 14d 1.01.052 grow silk bindings at 18/6 p grow 1.17.051 2 grow silk galloons at 18 1.16.052 1 grow narrow black silk pearl for tip at 5.053 2 grow broad ditto at 14s p grow 1.08.054 1 grow white thready broad gauze pearl at 10/6 10.655 2 dos black and white net gauze at 11 p dozen 1.02.056 1 dos black morning gauze at 12.057 1 dos white ditto at 12s 12.058 2 dos white thread gauze at 12 1.04.059 2 dos black silk ditto at 13 1.06.063 dos women's silk girdles WTH buckles 6 18.061 2 dos long ditto copper tassels at 3/9 7.662 1 dos rich silk and silver tassel ditto 12 for 12.063 1 dos best ditto at 15s 15.064 1 dos Rommel handkerchiefs at 16s p dos 16.065 1 dos silk ditto at 20s p dos 1.00.066 1 dos best large ditto at 23s 1.03.067 4 dos black mohair ring at 6 1.04.068 4 dos deep ditto at 7s p dos 1.08.069 2 dos copper color and pearl ditto at 6 p dos 12.074 dos color mix ditto at 7s 1.08.071 4 dos cloth color blah and scarlet ditto at 8 12.072 2 dos deep blah jubal ditto at 9s 6 19.073 18 dos nah fringe to set on ye top of fringe 20d 1.10.074 18 yards white corded thread fringe at 10d yard 15.075 13 ounces 1/2 blah bella silk fringe at 25d 1.02.676 27 ounces best nah and deep ditto at 21d 2.07.377 12 ounces copper color nah and deep ditto at 22D 1.0 2.078 18 ounces, 1/16 dew, and white nar, and deep mixed. Choose 1.16.1-1, 279 21 ounces 1/2 clo, color blue, and white nar, and deep 2-1 divided by 2D 2.08.4 80 21 ounces 1/2 clo, color green, and white corded dew 2 of 4D 2.10.2 81 17 ounces, 1/4 3/16 blah. Corded ditto at 2 PDOS 1.14.10-1. 282 1 grow 1/2 silk bread to set at bottom of fringe 14s 1.0 1.0 83.5 ps fair at 6D ribbon at 7s ps 1.15.0 84 1 grow blah 1D taffety ribbon at 7 7.0 85 2 grow ditto 2D ditto at 16p grow 1.12.0 86 12 ps Dutch 7/4 rib bins for binding dowels 20D 1.00.0 87 4 ps 6D taffety ribbon at 5 1.00.0 88 4 ps 8D ditto at 9 ps 1.16.0 89 1 ps 10 D ditto at 11.091 ps 12D ditto 13.091 4 ps double love rib ben 6D at 6 1.04.092 2 ps 8D ditto at 8 16.093 1 ps 10D ditto at 9.694 2 ps white span 6D ditto at 8 6 17.095 1 ps ditto 8D at 10 10.096 3 dos satin stripes 8D ribbon at 6 18.097 2 dos cloth color and purple figured 10 D ditto 8 16.098 2 dos blue and green 12D ditto at 11s 1.0 2.099 2 dos copper colored and blah 14D ditto at 13s 1.06.0 181 I clo color silk WTH a little blah at 17 6 7.0 101 1 child's peak at 6 6.0 102 1 woman's laced headdress at 10s 10.0 103 1 ditto laced at 13 13.0 104 1 a la mode dowel trimmed at 2s WTH blah pearl 2.0 105 1 tippet ditto at 2 4D 2.4 106 1 best ditto at 6/8 lace WTH blah silk 6.0 107 2 dos new fashion peak wires at 18 DP dos 3.0 108 2 dos cornet wires ditto at 2 P dos 4.0 109 4 dos commode wires ditto at 4 P dos 16.0 110 17 rolls at 5 DPPS 7.1 111 4 dos new fasten pass wires at 10s 3.4 112 1 grow stripped worsted at 9s P grow 9.0 a trunk and cords cost 12 for 12.0 59.18.01 bale of linen cloth number 3 cont as vis 2040 219 22039 330 22039 239 217 18 394 19 240 39 2024 35 1919 and 2 seconds 2019 223 13 219 219 19 219 240 392 20 22019 219 19 218 64 217 20 60 240 40 932 120 38 260 19 219 219 40 38 19 239 237 2020 19 220 19 19 19 220 19 220 19 2018 239 219 19 19 220 219 224 19 19 220 219 40 19 19 219 219 330 2394 435 313 2392 is 932 Ls 1/4 of camel's cloth, at 6 dp, L 23.6.0, 85 50 60 86 69 43 73 68 78 101 42 42 43 49 78 77 44 91, is 1129 of brown Oxenbriggs, at 50 Li roll 1500 Ls to a roll, at 8 dp, L the 8th of December, 3760.18.8. Pound 1127.17.7. Footnotes 1. Essex County Quarterly Court Records, Volume 2, page 28, 2. Waters, Ipswich in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. 3. In the Delaware settlement, houses of logs split through the middle, or hewed square, were built according to the Swedish mode. 4. Mort's Relation, Boston, 1841. 5. Higginson, New England's Plantation, London, 1630. 6. Force's Tracks, Washington, 1838. 7. Essex County Quarterly Court Records, Volume 6, page 363. 8. Essex County Deeds, Book V, Leaf 107. 9. Johnson, Wonder Working Providence, London, 1654. 10. Higginson, New England's Plantation, London, 1630. 11. Force's Tracks, Washington, 1838. 12. Massachusetts Archives, Volume 15B, leaves 59 to 67. 13. Essex County Quarterly Court Records, Volume 4, pp 56 to 57. 14. Beer in the Making. 15. Probate Records of Essex County, Mass Volume 1, page 47. 16. Probate Records of Essex County, Mass, Volume 2, page 348. 17. Dancus, Journal of a Voyage to New York, Brooklyn, 1867. 18. Records of the Mass Bay Colony, Volume 1, page 126. 19. Ward, The Simple Cobbler of Agawam, London, 1647. 20. Sewell's Diary, Volume 2, page 231. 21. Essex County Quarterly Court Records, Volume 1, page 275. 22. The Master of the Ship George Bonaventure, in which Mr. Skelton came over. Transcribers' notes: perceived typographical errors in the author's text have been silently corrected. Archaic spelling and inconsistent punctuation in quoted text and tables have been retained as in the original. Inconsistencies in hyphenation and compound words have been maintained as printed. Footnotes have been moved to the end of the text. The persign is a symbol used to indicate a ratio. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook, Domestic Life in New England in the 17th Century. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Updated editions will replace the previous one. The old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works. So the Foundation and you can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances, and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works. By using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg, You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license available with this file, or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Electronic Works 1.a. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark or copyright agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg electronic work, and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the Foundation, or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States, and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing, or creating derivative works based on this work, or any other Project Gutenberg work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e. Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg, 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away, or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook, or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7, or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work, or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links, or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary, or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII, or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg website at www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII, or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg license, as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.8. You may charge a reasonable fee for copies of or providing access to or distributing Project Gutenberg electronic works provided that you pay a royalty fee of 20% of the gross profits you derive from the use of Project Gutenberg works calculated using the method you already use to calculate your applicable taxes. The fee is owed to the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, but he has agreed to donate royalties under this paragraph to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Royalty payments must be paid within 60 days following each date on which you prepare, or are legally required to prepare, your periodic tax returns. Royalty payments should be clearly marked as such and sent to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation at the address specified in Section 4, Information about Donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. You provide a full refund of any money paid by a user who notifies you in writing, or by email, within 30 days of receipt, that he does not agree to the terms of the full Project Gutenberg license. You must require such a user to return or destroy all copies of the works possessed in a physical medium and discontinue all use of and all access to other copies of Project Gutenberg works. You provide, in accordance with paragraph 1.f.3, a full refund of any money paid for a work or a replacement copy, if a defect in the electronic work is discovered and reported to you within 90 days of receipt of the work. You comply with all other terms of this agreement for free distribution of Project Gutenberg works. 1.e.9. If you wish to charge a fee or distribute a Project Gutenberg electronic work or group of works on different terms than are set forth in this agreement, you must obtain permission in writing from the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the manager of the Project Gutenberg trademark. Contact the Foundation as set forth in Section 3 below. 1.f. 1.f.1. Project Gutenberg volunteers and employees expend considerable effort to identify, do copyright research on, transcribe, and proofread works not protected by U.S. copyright law in creating the Project Gutenberg collection. Despite these efforts, Project Gutenberg electronic works, and the medium on which they may be stored, may contain defects, such as, but not limited to, incomplete, inaccurate, or corrupt data, transcription errors, a copyright or other intellectual property infringement, a defective or damaged disk or other medium, a computer virus, or computer codes that damage or cannot be read by your equipment. 1.f.2 Limited warranty, disclaimer of damages except for the right of replacement or refund described in paragraph 1.f.3. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the owner of the Project Gutenberg trademark, and any other party distributing a Project Gutenberg electronic work under this agreement, disclaim all liability to you for damages, costs and expenses, including legal fees. You agree that you have no remedies for negligence, strict liability, breach of warranty, or breach of contract except those provided in paragraph 1.f.3. You agree that the Foundation, the trademark owner, and any distributor under this agreement will not be liable to you for actual, direct, indirect, consequential, punitive or incidental damages even if you give notice of the possibility of such damage. 1.f.3 Limited right of replacement or refund. If you discover a defect in this electronic work within 90 days of receiving it, you can receive a refund of the money, if any, you paid for it by sending a written explanation to the person you received the work from. If you received the work on a physical medium, you must return the medium with your written explanation. The person or entity that provided you with the defective work may elect to provide a replacement copy in lieu of a refund. If you received the work electronically, the person or entity providing it to you may choose to give you a second opportunity to receive the work electronically in lieu of a refund. If the second copy is also defective, you may demand a refund in writing without further opportunities to fix the problem. 1.f.4 Except for the limited right of replacement or refund set forth in paragraph 1.f.3, this work is provided to you as is, with no other warranties of any kind, express or implied, including but not limited to warranties of merchantability or fitness for any purpose. 1.f.5 Some states do not allow disclaimers of certain implied warranties, or the exclusion or limitation of certain types of damages. If any disclaimer or limitation set forth in this agreement violates the law of the state applicable to this agreement, the agreement shall be interpreted to make the maximum disclaimer or limitation permitted by the applicable state law. The invalidity or unenforceability of any provision of this agreement shall not void the remaining provisions. 1.f.6 Indemnity. You agree to indemnify and hold the Foundation, the trademark owner, any agent or employee of the Foundation, anyone providing copies of Project Gutenberg electronic works in accordance with this agreement, and any volunteers associated with the production, promotion and distribution of Project Gutenberg electronic works, harmless from all liability, costs and expenses, including legal fees, that arise directly or indirectly from any of the following which you do or cause to occur. A. Distribution of this or any Project Gutenberg work. B. Alteration, modification, or additions or deletions to any Project Gutenberg work. And C. Any defect you cause. Section 2. Information about the mission of Project Gutenberg. Project Gutenberg is synonymous with the free distribution of electronic works in formats readable by the widest variety of computers, including obsolete, old, middle-aged and new computers. It exists because of the efforts of hundreds of volunteers and donations from people in all walks of life. Volunteers and financial support to provide volunteers with the assistance they need are critical to reaching Project Gutenberg's goals and ensuring that the Project Gutenberg collection will remain freely available for generations to come. In 2001, the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation was created to provide a secure and permanent future for Project Gutenberg and future generations. To learn more about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation and how your efforts and donations can help, see sections 3 and 4 and the Foundation information page at www.gutenberg.org. Section 3. Information about the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation is a non-profit 501(c)(3) educational corporation organized under the laws of the state of Mississippi and granted tax-exempt status by the Internal Revenue Service. The Foundation's EIN, or Federal Tax Identification Number, is 64-6221541. Contributions to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation are tax-deductible to the full extent permitted by U.S. federal laws and your state's laws. The Foundation's business office is located at 809 North 1500 West, Salt Lake City, Utah, 84116, 801-596-1887. Email contact links and up-to-date contact information can be found at the Foundation's website and official page at www.gutenberg.org/contact section 4. Information about donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation. Project Gutenberg depends upon and cannot survive without widespread public support and donations to carry out its mission of increasing the number of public domain and licensed works that can be freely distributed in machine-readable form accessible by the widest array of equipment, including outdated equipment. Many small donations, $1 to $5,000, are particularly important to maintaining tax-exempt status with the IRS. The Foundation is committed to complying with the laws regulating charities and charitable donations in all 50 states of the United States. Compliance requirements are not uniform, and it takes a considerable effort, much paperwork, and many fees to meet and keep up with these requirements. We do not solicit donations in locations where we have not received written confirmation of compliance. To send donations or determine the status of compliance for any particular state, visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. While we cannot and do not solicit contributions from states where we have not met the solicitation requirements, we know of no prohibition against accepting unsolicited donations from donors in such states who approach us with offers to donate. International donations are gratefully accepted, but we cannot make any statements concerning tax treatment of donations received from outside the United States. U.S. laws alone swamp our small staff. Please check the Project Gutenberg web pages for current donation methods and addresses. Donations are accepted in a number of other ways, including checks, online payments, and credit card donations. To donate, please visit www.gutenberg.org/donate. Section 5. General information about Project Gutenberg Electronic Works. Professor Michael S. Hart was the originator of the Project Gutenberg concept of a library of electronic works that could be freely shared with anyone. For 40 years, he produced and distributed Project Gutenberg ebooks with only a loose network of volunteer support. Project Gutenberg ebooks are often created from several printed editions, all of which are confirmed as not protected by copyright in the U.S. unless a copyright notice is included. Thus, we do not necessarily keep ebooks in compliance with any particular paper edition. Most people start at our website, which has the main PG search facility, www.gutenberg.org. This website includes information about Project Gutenberg, including how to make donations to the Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, how to help produce our new ebooks, and how to subscribe to our email newsletter to hear about new ebooks.